Today we are going to graph using x and y intercepts. So let's first talk about what an x and a y intercept are. So an x-intercept is a point where a graph crosses the x-axis. An x-intercept happens when the y is 0. To find the x-intercept from an equation, you're going to replace the y, or it could be written as f of x with a 0. Because we're finding what does x equal whenever y is 0. So we're going to replace the y with a 0 and solve for x. And our coordinate for the x-intercept is going to be an x, a number for x, and a 0 for y. So it's going to be written as a coordinate like that. The deal with x-intercepts is that it has more than one name. So it's going to be aka, also known as a solution, what is the solution to the graph or to the equation? You're finding out what does x equal. It can also be 0. What is the 0 of the function? Or root of the function. Or they could just say, what is the intercept? So there's lots of different names just for x-intercept. So you have to know whenever you're being asked these things, what they mean is, where does it cross the x-axis? Where does that line or curve or whatever the function is, where it crosses the x-axis? Okay, so the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So the y-intercept happens when the x is 0. So it's the opposite of the x-intercept. It's where it crosses the y-axis. So to find your y-intercept from an equation, you're going to replace x, this time, with 0, and solve for y. So you'll see x and y-intercepts throughout all of your high school math courses, as well as college algebra. We find the x and y-intercepts. So it's good to know it now and to have a foundation now, so whenever you get to those upper level math courses, you'll know what it's talking about. So if we have this graph, one thing with the y-intercept is the coordinate will be 0, y, because x is 0, y is some number. That would be the coordinate. And it doesn't have any other names. The only thing is, if it's written as y equals mx plus b, then b is going to be your y-intercept, which we learned that last week when we were graphing. So from an equation like that, you could find your y-intercept just by looking at the b value. So if we just have a graph like this, where it crosses the x-axis is our x-intercept. So we have a coordinate right here. This is our x-intercept. I'm going to abbreviate just x and then int period. We're going to write the coordinates. So we're just going to go by ones because it didn't change it. So that'd be 2, 0.
Is someone at the door?
Then we have our y-intercept where it crosses the y-axis. So this coordinate would be, this is y-intercept. I'm going to abbreviate again. And that is 0 left and right up to 4. So 0, 4. So finding the x and y intercept from a graph is pretty easy. You're just looking for that coordinate. So let's look at these two examples. We're just looking for the x and y intercepts. Label your x-axis on this one. It got cut off. So you can write the x-intercept as 4, x equals 4, or you can write it as a coordinate pair. So it'd be 4, 0. Or you can say x equals 4. Then your y-intercept, that's at -3. The coordinate would be 0, -3. Or you can say y equals -3. So there are two ways of finding them or writing the solutions. And then our x-intercept on the next one, where it crosses the x-axis, pretty simple. So the important thing is just knowing the vocabulary, knowing what an x-intercept is, knowing what a y-intercept is. Once you know it, it's easy to find whenever you're just looking at the graph. So whenever we're given an equation, which is what we'll be given for our assignment when we're given problems, what's the x and y intercept, it's not going to be written one way or another, but we are going to look at it whenever it's written in standard form. AX plus BY equals C. That's our standard form. And what we want to find is the x-intercept and the y-intercept just by looking at the equation. You are going to have to show some work and not just write an answer. It says, for the x-intercept, what is the value of y at the x-intercept? So you look at both of these x-intercepts, the y value is 0. And that is always the case. So we are going to substitute in, plug in 0 for y and solve for x. But the neat thing about this is if I plug in a 0, that's going to be 0, because if you plug in a 0 here, 4 times 0 is 0. So that's going to basically wipe clean. It's going to be covered up. And look what's left. See how it says 2x equals 16? This is going to 0 out and just leave 2x equals 16. And we can solve it like that. We're solving for x now. So that means x is 8. So my x-intercept is at 8. So I look at my x-axis, but if I look, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I could actually do is count by 2s if I'd like, because it isn't already specified on here. So I'm going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I'm changing the scale. All right, now do -2, -4, -6, -8, -10. So at x equals 8, that's our x-intercept. So go ahead and put a dot there for our x-intercept. So we have 1 point. As long as we have 2 points, we can make a line. So let's find our y-intercept. So look at our y-intercepts here. See what the x value is? It's always 0. So it says, what is the value of x at the y-intercept? 0. So we are going to plug in a 0 for x here. Whenever you do that, that zeroes out because 2 times 0 is 0. I can cover it up and I can look and see what is left. 4y equals 16. That's my equation that's left over. And now I want to solve for y. So we want to plot this. Since we did the x-axis by 2's, to keep it proportional, I'm going to do the y-axis by 2's also. And so we can plot that point. And make your line. Use your ruler to make that line. Extend the line all the way. So let's go to the next problem. Graphing using intercepts. So we're finding the x-intercept first, and then the y-intercept. So I'm going to make 2 spots for it right here, right here. So for the x-intercept, I'm making y 0. So I have x minus 5y equals 5. I'm making the y 0. So whenever I make that y 0, it zeroes negative 5y out. So some teachers teach to find the y-intercept or the x-intercept, cover up the y. And look at what we have left. X equals 5. Because what's going to happen here? It's going to zero out. So that just leaves me with x equals 5. I can cross it out if that makes me feel better. All right, so once I get that, I'm going to do this one, and then I'll graph it. So this one, it's again x minus 5y equals 5. So the x is 0. Whenever you put in a 0 for a value, it zeroes it out. Look at what I have left. It's negative 5y equals 5. It's not 5y, because even though that says x minus 5y, whenever there's not a number in front of it, it becomes just negative 5y. When there's a number in front of it, it becomes minus 5y. So I'm going to put negative 5y equals 5. And to solve, I just divide by negative 5. Y equals 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. So I have my 2 intercepts. So I can go ahead and graph them. Looks like I can go by ones here, right? I'm not going to label it. I'm just going to go ahead and put the y-intercept at negative 1, the x-intercept at 5. At 5. I don't know if I said negative or not. I meant to say positive 5 if I did. And you could actually find the slope from this now. Just count rise over run. Up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's go to the next one. X-intercept means y is 0. So if I have negative 2x plus 4y equals negative 12. Plug in a 0 for y. Anytime you multiply a number times 0, it becomes 0, so we can just mark it out. I get negative 2x equals negative 12. Solving for x, so divide by a negative 2, negative 2. So x equals 6. Okay, the y-intercept, I have negative 2x plus 4y equals negative 12. So to find my y-intercept, I want to solve for y. X is 0, so I plug in a 0 there. Cancels out. That leaves me with 4y equals negative 12. It's a positive, so that's why I didn't carry down a negative or anything like that. It's positive. Then I divide by 4. Y equals negative 3. All right, so we need to put 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess I could go ahead and do it like that, right? I don't have to go by 2s because it's still in the grid. And then negative 3. Okay, and then the last example on these notes, we need to find our x-intercept and our y-intercept. So we have negative 1/2 x plus y equals negative 4. Plug in a 0 for y. When you do that, it crosses out. We're left with negative 1/2 x equals negative 4. So think about this. Negative 1/2 times something to get negative 4. So remember when we solved fraction equations? If you have a fraction that's being multiplied, you can either divide by that fraction or you can multiply by the reciprocal. My favorite word. Because this is going to become 1. Negative 2 over 1 times negative 1 over 2. So it's x equals. Negative times a negative, though. Positive 8, yeah. Then our y-intercept, negative 1/2 x plus y equals negative 4. We plug in a 0 for x. That cancels. And look how easy this one is. Y equals negative 4. That's it. Okay, so since 8 is big, I'm going to go ahead and say go by 2s. Then plot your x and y intercepts. Go ahead and glue this in the next page of your journal.